Most people do not stay poor because they are lazy. They stay poor because they are running the wrong code. I have watched people work hard for 30 years and still end up financially fragile, not because they lacked intelligence, not because they lacked effort, but because every payday triggered the same invisible sequence. Money came in, everybody else got paid first: rent, lender, card company, subscription, convenience, mood, image. Then whatever scraps survived were called savings. That is not a financial plan. That is surrender dressed up as adulthood. You can earn more and still live inside that trap. You can get promoted and still live inside that trap. You can marry someone responsible, move to a better neighborhood, buy better groceries, download budgeting apps, read a few books, and still live inside that trap. Because the problem is not your salary first. The problem is your money operating system. If your operating system is wrong, every extra dollar only moves faster through the same broken pipes. I did not build wealth by letting the world take first claim on my cash flow. I built wealth by controlling sequence. Sequence is what most people ignore. They obsess over amount. I care about order in capital allocation. Order decides destiny in life. It does too. You think you need a bigger paycheck. Sometimes you do. But many people do not have an income problem first. They have a sequence problem, a behavior problem, an identity problem, and then later an income problem. They pay themselves last. They treat debt like furniture. They do not know their own numbers. They let hobbies become status leaks. They try to save pennies while refusing to build earning power. They hand more to taxes than they need to because they never learned the rules. They delay investing until time. The one thing no man can manufacture has already walked out the door. That is not bad luck. That is shadow code. Shadow code is the set of financial habits you obey without naming them. It sits under your life like an operating system. It decides where your money goes before your conscious mind ever gets to pretend it made a decision. You think you are choosing dinner, choosing a car payment, choosing a weekend, choosing a card swipe, choosing to wait until next month. In truth, the code is choosing. The code runs faster than your intentions, and if you do not rewrite it, you can spend your entire life being a high-effort employee for a low-quality personal balance sheet. The first line of bad code is simple. You pay yourself last. This is the oldest financial mistake in the book because it flatters the ego. It lets you feel responsible. You paid the bills. You kept the lights on. You handled the month. Then you look at what remains and call the leftovers discipline. There is almost never enough left. There was never going to be enough left. Leftovers do not build freedom. Leftovers build excuses. When I buy a business, I do not ask what it might save if everything goes perfectly. I ask what cash the business keeps before the world gets creative. A household is no different. If your own future gets paid only after every present desire has had its turn, your future will never become capitalized. You are not paying yourself last by accident. You are declaring that your future self ranks below your current appetites. That is a brutal truth, but it is true. You do not become secure because one day life gets cheaper. Life rarely gets cheaper. Life gets more expensive. And when income rises, spending often rises with it. Bigger apartment, better phone, better clothes, better holidays, better excuses, a raise arrives, and instead of gaining ownership, you upgrade your overhead. The world calls that progress. I call it a more comfortable cage. The rich habit is not complicated, it is uncomfortable. The moment the paycheck arrives, a piece of it must disappear out of your reach and into your control. Minimum 10% if that is what you can begin with. More if your life is not already built like a hostage note. Treat that transfer like oxygen, not like a maybe. The bill that matters most is the one owed to the person you will be 10 years from now. People resist that because it feels small. 10% feels too small to matter. That is because most people are addicted to dramatic numbers and blind to repeated sequence. Wealth does not begin as a mountain. It begins as a command. Money comes in, a claim is made for the future. The future gets fed before the present starts bargaining. That one shift does more than build savings. It changes the psychological hierarchy of your life. You stop behaving like a consumer who occasionally saves, and you start behaving like an owner who funds his own balance sheet. First, the second line of bad code is debt normality. I have said for a long time that if you are smart, you do not need leverage. And if you are dumb, leverage will kill you. The modern household has turned that warning into decoration. People borrow for gifts, clothes, gadgets, dinners, travel, emotional relief, identity, maintenance, And then they call this normal because everyone around them does it. Everyone around them is not a defense. Everyone around them is evidence. Bad debt is not just expensive. It is invasive. It steals options before it steals dollars. The card statement arriving every month is not merely a bill. It is a tax on future choices. It forces you to work for yesterday's consumption. It turns next month's labor into collateral for last week's impulse. That is the cruelty of high-interest consumer debt. It makes the past own the future. A card company charging 20+% interest is not in a relationship with you. It is operating a toll road through your weakness, the points, the miles, the rewards, the little digital confetti. None of that matters if you carry a balance. A 22% interest rate does not get canceled by a 1% cashback smile. That is arithmetic, not opinion. A great many people are proud of handling debt, when what they really mean is surviving the minimum payment. Survival is not strategy. Minimum payment is not mastery. You do not build wealth, while expensive debt is silently compounding against you. You are trying to climb an escalator that is moving down. The rule should be so simple it insults you. If you cannot afford to buy the thing without debt, you should assume you cannot afford the thing. There are exceptions in life. A home can be one. A productive business asset can be one. Education can be one if it is connected to real earning power and bought at a sane price. But sweaters on credit, vacations on credit, status on credit, boredom relief on credit, that is not financing. That is self-sabotage with monthly billing. The third line of bad code is living without a buffer. Most people think the purpose of savings is growth. In the early stage, the purpose of savings is survival. Before money can become a snowball, it must become armor. Before your cash can invest, it must first absorb impact. It is not money doing nothing. It is not proof that you are behind. It is the anti-panic reserve that keeps one bad week from becoming a bad year. It is the line between inconvenience and catastrophe. A tire blows, a flight changes, a laptop dies, a child gets sick, hours get cut, a contract disappears. The transmission goes, a parent needs help. If you live with no buffer, every one of those events arrives not as a problem, but as a threat to your identity. You panic, you borrow, you sell, you miss payments, you lie to yourself, you tell your nervous system that money is chaos. Then you wonder why your financial behavior stays emotional. No buffer means you are permanently negotiating with fear. Fear is expensive. Fear buys the cheaper boots that wear out first. Fear takes the payday loan. Fear keeps the balance on the card. Fear accepts the rotten job because one missed check would detonate the month. Fear prevents rational investing because every dollar not visible in cash feels like danger. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a hidden expense category. That is why paying yourself first matters. Not because it sounds virtuous, because it builds a 6-month argument against panic. Maybe you begin with 1 month, then 2, then 3. Good. The exact number at the beginning matters less than the direction. You are moving from fragility toward refusal power. Refusal power is one of the most valuable assets in life. When you have no buffer, you cannot refuse a bad boss, a predatory contract, a stupid emergency purchase, a dangerous loan, or a humiliating dependency. When you have a buffer, you begin to buy the right to think. Most people think money buys luxury. The first thing money buys is time between stimulus and reaction. That gap is priceless. The fourth line of bad code is numerical blindness. I am always amazed by how many adults can tell you the score of a game, the plot of a television series, the gossip of an office, the options package on a stranger's car, but cannot tell you what they spend in a month. How much of it is fixed? How much is impulse? What their savings rate is? What their liabilities cost? What their net worth is? Or what it would take to buy back 1 year of their life? You cannot improve what you refuse to measure. That is not a slogan. It is accounting reality. A business that does not know its cash flow margin, obligations, and inventory position is not a business I want to own. Why would I admire a household run that way? Some people avoid their numbers because they are afraid the numbers will judge them. The numbers are already judging you. They just do it silently. They do it through overdrafts, anxiety, chronic catch-up behavior, and the feeling that progress never seems to stick. Putting the numbers in black and white does not create the problem. It reveals the problem in a form you can finally attack. This is where lifestyle inflation quietly enters the frame. Income rises, expenses rise. The story sounds harmless, You worked hard, you deserve a little more comfort, you make more, so you spend more. That seems reasonable until you realize the increase in spending is often faster than the increase in security. Your visible life improves, your hidden position does not. You look richer and remain exposed. That is one of the most expensive illusions in modern life. Outer scorecard goes up. Inner balance sheet stays weak. You do not need a complicated software suite to solve this. You need honesty. What comes in? What goes out? What repeats? What can be cut without wounding a life worth living? What purchases are really substitutes for rest, clarity, meaning, or self-respect, where the monthly leaks are? Which expenses buy capability, and which expenses merely buy sedation? Once you see the numbers, your fantasy budget dies. Good fantasy never built freedom. The fifth line of bad code is turning hobbies into identity leaks. There is nothing wrong with pleasure. There is something very wrong with calling every pleasure harmless when it is draining your future. Shopping is not neutral when it becomes emotional regulation. Convenience is not neutral when it becomes dependency. Upgrades are not neutral when they become ritual. Expensive hobbies are not evil, but if your lifestyle is financed by hope instead of margin, they stop being hobbies and start becoming wealth extraction devices. Most people do not say, "I choose status over freedom." They say, "I work hard. I deserve this." Maybe you do, but deserving is not the same as affording. And affording is not the same as being able to own the consequences. What ruins people is rarely one spectacular luxury. It is recurring identity spending, the premium gym membership you barely use but feel guilty canceling, the wardrobe refreshes that keep pace with the office hierarchy, the weekends that cost more because your friends confuse spending with living, the subscriptions, the upgrades, the little treats, the restaurant convenience, the hobby equipment bought to support a version of you that never actually materializes. That is not recreation. That is leakage. Leakage matters because wealth is built from retained earnings. If a business has attractive revenue, but awful leakage, I do not care how good the story is. The owners will not get rich. Individuals are the same. A high earner with poor retention is often poorer in strategic terms than a moderate earner with strong retention and discipline. This is why some people make six figures and still feel hunted. They built a lifestyle that eats at the speed their income arrives. The sixth line of bad code is believing that saving alone will save you. Saving matters. I want you to save. I want you to save aggressively. But I do not want you to worship the ceiling. There is a limit to how much you can cut. There is not the same limit to how much you can earn. That distinction changes the whole game. Many people spend years becoming experts in tiny discounts and never once make a serious plan to increase their value in the market. They become masters of coupons, cashback sites, comparison shopping, and minor savings tricks, while ignoring raises, skills, sales ability, negotiation, side income, ownership, or learning how money is really made. They become elegant defenders of a small income instead of builders of a larger one. That is a trap. On one side of the equation is reduction. On the other side is expansion. Wealth, but the expansion side has infinite upside. You can only cut so many coffees. You can only cancel so many subscriptions. You can only squeeze a household budget so far before the quality of life collapses or the savings become trivial. But earning power can rise dramatically. Skills can compound. Reputation can compound. Ownership can compound. A side business can grow. A promotion can increase cash flow. Commission can increase cash flow. Equity can transform an entire decade. The point is not to become reckless with hustle language. The point is to stop pretending that a smaller grocery bill is a complete strategy. A worker mindset asks, how do I survive this month a little more cheaply? An owner mindset asks, how do I make my time more valuable, my labor more rare, my output more useful, and my income streams less dependent on one gatekeeper? That is a very different question, and it produces a very different life. The seventh line of bad code is tax passivity. Taxes will very likely be the largest expense of your life. Yet many people spend more time choosing a streaming service than learning the basic rules around tax shelters, retirement accounts, legal deductions, business structure, or where different forms of income get treated differently. They assume tax is a weather system. It is not. It is a rule book. If you do not learn the rule book, you will overpay simply because you were too passive to study. I am not telling you to play games. I am telling you not to volunteer ignorance. There is a difference. Wealthy people do not love writing unnecessary checks. They hire accountants. They learn how retirement accounts work. They understand that a Roth IRA, an ISA, in the appropriate jurisdiction, tax-advantaged accounts, business expense rules, legal entity structures, and the timing of gains can all change the compounding path of a life. They understand that every unnecessary tax dollar paid today is a dollar that cannot earn for them tomorrow. Think about the arithmetic. A dollar not invested does not merely disappear once. It loses every future year of compounding too. Tax inefficiency is not a single leak. It is a leak with a time machine attached. Some people say, I would rather not think about tax. That is fine. The government is happy to think about it for you. I would rather you understand the legal rules, reduce the bill where appropriate, and then decide where your values belong. If you want to donate, donate. If you want to support causes, support them. But choose intentionally. Do not confuse passivity with morality. The 8th line of bad code is delaying investment until you feel ready. Nobody feels ready. The world is full of people waiting for the perfect moment to begin. They want more knowledge, more confidence, more certainty, more money, better headlines, lower risk, less volatility, calmer markets, cleaner politics, fewer responsibilities, and a sign from the heavens that now is the appointed hour. Time does not care. Time continues to compound with or without your permission. This is one of the great tragedies of financial life. People understand that inflation exists. They know prices rise. They know cash loses purchasing power. They even say these things out loud. Then they leave money idle year after year because action feels emotionally heavier than inaction. They believe delay is safe. Delay is often simply silent loss. I am not arguing for reckless speculation. I am arguing against permanent hesitation. Once your buffer is in place, once the toxic debt is under control, once your cash flow is not held together by wishful thinking, money that sits endlessly in a bank account is often money in retreat. It is soldiers never sent to the front. You need your capital working. Broad, sensible, diversified, long horizon investing is not exciting. Good. Excitement is often a fee paid to the market by amateurs. What you want is participation. You want ownership. You want to turn labor income into asset income before your energy declines, before the best years vanish, before your needs rise faster than your capital base. The longer you wait, the more brutal the math becomes. If you delay for 10 years, you do not lose 10 years. You lose what those 10 years could have become. You lose the early doubling windows. You lose the years where small monthly contributions had the most time to mature. You lose the part of the story where effort was cheap and time did the heavy lift. That is why the delay habit is so dangerous. It does not feel like a mistake when you are making it. It feels prudent. It feels temporary. It feels like you are still gathering information. But often you are not gathering information. You are sheltering inside perfectionism because the first real move would force you to become the kind of person who acts. There is another line of bad code hiding underneath all of these, and it may be the most dangerous one. You keep telling yourself that your habits are small debt, small leak, small delay, small overspend, small ignorance, small avoidance, small indulgence, small tax waste, small hesitation, but small behaviors repeated under the same operating system become a life sentence. That is how compounding works on both sides. Good habits compound into freedom. Bad habits compound into dependency. Wealth is compounding, poverty is compounding too. One side builds options, the other side builds excuses. So let me give you the deeper diagnosis. Most people think money habits are about morality. They are not. They are about power. Paying yourself first is power. Killing bad debt is power. Building a buffer is power. Knowing your numbers is power. Controlling lifestyle inflation is power. Increasing your earning power is power. Understanding tax rules is power. Investing early is power. What looks like personal finance advice is actually a map of control. And control is what most people are starving for without naming it. They want a nicer car because it feels like control. They want a better phone because it feels like control. They want a bigger house because it feels like control. They want a vacation because it feels like control. But if the balance sheet underneath is weak, those things are not control. They are theater. Real control is having cash when others have stress. Real control is no toxic debt sucking oxygen out of your month. Real control is the ability to leave a bad situation. Real control is investing enough that your future is being funded, even when your feelings are unstable. Real control is having systems that protect you from your own impulses. I have spent my life allocating capital, and one lesson repeats everywhere. Good outcomes are rarely created by willpower alone. They are created by structure. A wonderful person inside a bad structure will still get bad results. An ordinary person inside a strong structure can do surprisingly well for a very long time. That should encourage you, because it means you do not need to become a different species. You need a different system. You need to automate the transfer to yourself. You need a written policy about debt. You need a target for your emergency reserve. You need a monthly money review, where the numbers are seen, not guessed. You need a cap on identity spending. You need a plan to raise income, not just reduce expenses. You need to know which tax shelters and legal structures apply to your life. You need an investing rule, so fear does not get to vote every month. That is the escape path, not intensity, not one perfect month, not a burst of motivation after a frightening video, a system. A system strong enough to survive your moods. If you want memorable names, here are the ones that matter. The leftover life. That is what happens when you pay yourself last and expect scraps to become freedom. The debt toll road. That is what high-interest borrowing becomes. When your future labor is forced to pay admission to your past impulses, the panic gap. That is the space between having no buffer and having enough reserve to think before reacting. The lifestyle trapdoor. That is what opens every time your income rises and your fixed costs quietly follow it upward. The coupon ceiling. That is the illusion that better bargain hunting can do the job of stronger earning power. The tax fog. That is the cost of refusing to learn rules that materially change your compounding path. The delay penalty. That is the price paid by people who confuse waiting with safety. These are not just phrases. They are mechanisms. If you can name a mechanism, you can begin to fight it. If you leave it unnamed, it remains a foggy part of life and keeps draining you while you tell yourself you will get serious later. Later is expensive. One of the cruelest lies in personal finance is that you can build wealth after you finally become disciplined enough. In many cases, discipline does not come first. Design comes first, your environment comes first, automation comes first, friction comes first, the right account structure comes first, a pay yourself first transfer that happens before you wake up often does more for a person than 100 guilty promises made at midnight. That is how adults win. Not by feeling inspired all the time, by making good behavior easier than bad behavior, by making bad behavior visible, by shrinking the number of financial decisions that depend on mood. When you do that, the entire tone of your life begins to change. The paycheck arrives, and you are not immediately behind. An emergency shows up, and you are irritated rather than destroyed. A market decline happens, and you are able to keep buying because your household is not starving. A tax season arrives, and you know which boxes are there for you instead of being surprised by the bill. An opportunity appears, and you have capital or credibility or both. That is what the public usually misses about wealth. Wealth is not just more stuff. It is lower cortisol. It is cleaner decision making. It is less humiliation. It is fewer desperate choices. It is being harder to trap. And the trap is always built the same way. First, the world convinces you that your little habits do not matter. Then it convinces you that debt is normal. Then it convinces you that comfort is the same as progress. Then it convinces you that learning the rules is for other people. Then it tells you to wait until income rises. Wait until you feel smarter. Wait until life settles down. Wait until the market looks safer. Wait until the children are older. Wait until next quarter. Wait until next year. Wait until someday. Someday is where compounding goes to die. I do not want you waiting for a heroic identity. I want you choosing a hard sequence. Next paycheck, pay yourself first. Next statement, attack bad debt without mercy. Next month, begin building your buffer until panic loses its vote. Next review, write down every inflow, every outflow, every recurring obligation, every leak. Next raise, do not upgrade your cage. Next year, build earning power with the same seriousness you bring to cutting costs. Understand the legal shelters available to you. Next surplus dollar beyond your buffer, put capital to work. Do that consistently, and something extraordinary happens. The shadow code stops running your life. You begin writing your own. And here is the final test. When the next paycheck lands, who gets paid first? Your lender, your landlord, your card company, your habits. your image, your cravings, or the person you claim you are trying to become. That is the whole game. Not what you say you value, what you fund first. If your future still gets what is left, then do not tell me you are serious about freedom. You are serious about maintenance. Freedom begins the day your future stops eating leftovers.